It was a disappointing performance, to say the least, wasn't it? Losing 1-0 away against Panama. That's their first World Cup qualifying loss against those opponents in 9 matches. They had no shot at all on target in that tie. You have to go back to 2013 for the last time that happened. And of course, Greg Berhalter made 7 changes to the starting 11 that beat Jamaica 2-0 last week. So more reaction to that defeat against Panama. Let's welcome in, shall we? Former US men's national team coach Jurgen Klinsmann, former international Herculez Gomez with us. Herc, let's start with you. The rhetoric seemed to be after the game pretty much, look, we were focused very much on that home tie against Costa Rica on Thursday, to the detriment, really, to what happened last night.
Yeah, it's sports, right? It's sports. It's very surprising, and we could put a lot of stock in if 7 changes was too much, if this national team isn't deep enough, all that stuff. But it's execution, it's tactics, it's technical ability, it's talent. Everything that the U.S. men's national team didn't have against Panama. A Panama team that you looked past, or you tried to look past. They were focused on Costa Rica in Ohio instead of Panama, a very good Panamanian side who, by the way, tied Canada at home, by the way, tied Mexico at home, and now has beaten the U.S. men's national team at home. You can't look past this team. Even though you look at the roster, you look at their players, and you say, well, look, they've got some players in Bolivia. Oh, look, they got some players in second division Spain. What you did was say, my 7 changes, my 7 players who came on here that aren't at the level of our starting 11 are going to be good enough to get a result in Panama. And not only did you say that, but you said, and we're going to do it in a way where we try playing out of the back, where our center backs, Walker Zimmerman and Mark McKenzie, are going to be vital in the way we push the ball up the field, where our wing progressions and our center midfield play is going to give us enough possession to create scoring opportunities so the center forward and the opposite end or opposite weak side player can get into the box and get across things. You were just arrogant. The same arrogance that's seen the U.S. men's national team not go to the last World Cup, where this Panamanian side did go to the last World Cup. You see a Panamanian side that played in a way that was simple, that was disciplined, and complicated, the living hell out of the U.S. men's national team, who couldn't connect passes. And they talk about effort. Effort has nothing to do with this. If you don't put your players in positions to succeed against teams that are very good, especially at home, and very good, especially in complicated conditions like the heat, this is going to happen. These are excuses. Greg Berhalter made 7 changes. Mexico made 2. Panama, the same team that lost to El Salvador, they made 2. You can say whatever you want, but you were thinking about Costa Rica. You were thinking about the next game, not about this game.
Jurgen, when we talk about qualifying in CONCACAF, we talk about getting it done at home. If you can win your home games, then you were pretty much there. So given that fact, do you understand why Greg Berhalter made so many changes last night away against Panama with one eye on Costa Rica?
Well, difficult to say. Obviously, Greg knows the reasons far better. He knows exactly where every player stands, what his conditions is, and how he wants to see then the game execute his plan. I mean, obviously, you can only look from game to game. You can only, look at before you are, basically going to Panama City. You can only think about Panama and how to kind of take the hurdle there, because every away game in CONCACAF is really difficult. Because of the climate, because of the field conditions, because of the referee and all that stuff. So you can only take it one game at a time. So I'm a bit surprised that, you already think ahead to the next game when you host Costa Rica than at home. Obviously, he couldn't take 2 players with him, as he said, because of specific reasons. But that hurts. I mean, it hurts because I don't think it was necessary leaving all 3 points there. When the players say, that there was a lack of intensity, that's not a good saying, because the intensity has to be there. I mean, it's World Cup qualifying. I mean, you can lose a game, but you got to battle. You got to be feisty. You got to be aggressive. You got to have, your players on the field, that are really kind of understanding, how severe it is, how important it is. So therefore, obviously, he has now the chance in the home game against Costa Rica to correct a couple of things, and he will. I'm 100% sure, but I think it was an unnecessary loss.
What's striking, Ali, and this is something we've talked about a lot, and I've learned a lot since I've come here, is the away games in CONCACAF are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So why put out such an inexperienced side when surely this is where you need to rely on some of your older heads within that squad?
The most disappointing part of that press conference from Greg Berhalter is the fact that he accepts that his team did not quite show the intensity or the energy that this game required. If there was one thing that any of us could tell this team ahead of the game in the team huddle is match the intensity the first 15, 20 minutes. You have to be able to be ready for the fight. And then after we match the intensity, after we match the energy, then we can play. After we take the crowd out of this game, then we can play. But when you allow Panama to all of a sudden get on top of you, and you look nervous, and you look passive, and you look like you're not ready, almost as if you're surprised that they're willing to match you physically, that they're willing to fight you, that they're willing to win 50-50 challenge, that they're willing to get into rebounds. And then if you're a fan in that stadium, you see the United States, as shaky as they were early on in the match. If you did not believe going into the stadium that your team had a chance, after you see that start by the United States, you say, we have a chance.
Yeah.
We have a chance. We feel it. The stadium feels it. The players feel it on the field. And then all of a sudden it gets out of control and you can't quite catch up. Now, the other thing that doesn't quite match the rhetoric of Greg Berhalter is that he says, we didn't have the legs. Well, you made 7 changes to make sure that you had the legs. So that part doesn't quite match up in terms of the explanation and what we saw on the field. If you're making those changes, it's because you want fresh legs. If you want energy, you want intensity, but you didn't have any of that, and in the end, you paid for it.
And you're making big changes, Stevie. 3 changes to your back 4, which we discussed quite a lot. No matter what football it is, wherever it's played, that's going to be a problem.
Listen, I'm not so sure that Greg Berhalter did the wrong thing. I get the impression that Greg Berhalter pretty much figured out that he didn't think they could win this game. Because I'm not so sure that the US, in any case, with the so-called best players, has what good national teams have, and that is a core of 6 or 7 players that you can filter 2 or 3 young guys around. They don't have that. Regardless if everybody's fit or not, they don't have that. And so for him to maybe look ahead to Columbus against Costa Rica, he can't come out and say, you know what, I didn't think we could win this game, so I kept everybody for Costa Rica. He can't say that because he'll get absolutely slammed. But maybe he knows that what he's got is at a certain level, and what he's got can't play 3 games in the trot, and so you know what, I'm going to make a sacrifice. We won the first game, right. I'm going to make a sacrifice so that we win this 3rd game. I think that's what's in the back of his head.
Is that acceptable, Herc?
No, it's not, because if there's one opponent that historically, I mean, since 1998, you think you take your chances on the road, it's Panama. They're undefeated, or they were undefeated since that time versus Panama in World Cup qualifying. I understand what Stevie's saying, but you can't make so many changes and expect a cohesive unit, especially when you're asking them to play out of the back, when you're asking your outside backs, one who's very young, who's only gotten his 2nd game in a World Cup qualifier, and both on the road in George Bello, and then Shaq Moore, who's played all of 59 minutes this year, and ask them to be participants in the way you come out, in the way you construct play. It felt like he was asking too much of these players, and we could talk about player selection, we could talk about tactics, we could talk about energy, but we're not talking about Greg Berhalter. This is a very inexperienced team. Everybody talks about the inexperience of the U.S. men's national team. It's great that we have Christian Pulisic. It's great that they have, Gio Reyna at Dortmund. It's great that they have, Tyler Adams at Leipzig, all these players. But they're inexperienced when it comes to World Cup qualifying. When it comes to the national team, you know who's the most inexperienced? It's Greg Berhalter. We don't talk enough about that. He's going to take his lumps like he did last night. It was a bad judgment call. Greg Berhalter, he got this job of being successful with Columbus. Out of everybody in that crew, if you include the players and the coaching staff, he might be the most inexperienced when we're talking about this national team.
Hey, what about the summer of love? Being in Mexico twice. What's happened to all of that?
Yeah. Here it is. This paper's over cracks. Like in World Cup qualifying, we've done 10 halves of football. 10 halves. There have been 2 good halves for the U.S. men's national team. That means in 8 of those, your team was outplayed. In 8 of those, you were the 2nd team. Summer of love is great. You beat Mexico in the Nations League, CONCACAF Nations League final in a game where you were thoroughly outplayed, and 3 set-piece goals did you the favor, where your backup goalkeeper came on and he had a walk-off penalty kick save. Awesome. Your second team, or third team if you'd like, beat Mexico in the final in Las Vegas in another game where you were thoroughly outbeat, and you revert to the U.S. men's national team of old, and it's set pieces, fight, and grit. It's not this possession. It's not this very good on the eye. In the final third, we're combining. We're going to play a fast-paced game. We're going to play a more modern type of football that we've been sold by Greg Berhalter. You won those games when you were thoroughly outplayed the old way, the old U.S. men's national team way, which, by the way, isn't per se a bad way, but isn't what you were selling us now. I just mentioned those 10 halves of football. Only 2 positive. I'm no genius. I'm no math expert, but Jurgen's a coach right there. I don't think you'd feel particularly good about your team's play or your chances if the ratio is 2 out of 8, or 10, excuse me.
One moment late on in this game, which was so CONMEBOL, was the Panama ball boys. So all the balls, CONCACAF, sorry. All the ball boys were ready, had the balls ready, and they threw them all into the crowd late on to waste as much time as possible. And Jurgen, you of course experienced all of that. How much was that a surprise to you when you were coaching the US team? What was going on, all the shenanigans when you were going away for these sort of games?
I mean, that's part of it. That's part of the qualifiers. That's part of going into Central America. And yeah, that's frustrating. It's if you're not on top of your game from the first minute on, if you take it lightly, if you don't match up the aggressiveness of the opponent or even top that aggressiveness of them, you struggle. You struggle, and you're going to lose games on the road. And then you get forced to get your points for sure. 100%, you got to get your 3 points in every home match. And if you don't do that, then, you know, I mean, now with 8 teams instead of 6, it might be even more difficult kind of to make sure that you are one of the top 3, or at least, you know, in the 4th place to get the qualification game there. So, no, but all those things we are aware of. I mean, this is a normal thing to deal with when you go into Central America. You got to adapt to their rules. You got to adapt to their climate, to their way of doing things. And it's also fun. I have to say, I love that. I mean, I loved it on one side. I hated it on the other side. But the learning curve is there. I mean, your players learn to deal with it, you know, and your staff as well. But obviously, you got to make sure you get your points. You got to make sure you get the points.
A lot more reaction then from Herc and Seb on the latest edition of Football Americas. As always, you can check that out over on ESPN Plus. I imagine Seb will be getting quite hot under the collar.
Again?
Well, it's every show, isn't it? That's pretty standard. We've mentioned it, haven't we? The US then against Costa Rica. That game coming up this week live on ESPN 2. Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.